Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, it's Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 470 of the podcast. It's March 1st, 2023. Our guest today is Gary Michel, and you'll learn more about him and his background in a minute. We've got a fairly unusual opportunity today to hear the perspectives of a CEO. Gary has been the CEO of many organizations, and he's not just supporting Lean in those roles. He's been really owning Lean and driving it as part of the culture and the strategy of the organizations he's been with. So I think you're really going to enjoy the discussion here today. And it was actually Gary. He was the one here in the conversation who keeps bringing the talk back to the shop floor, the Gemba, if you will, the people who work there. So we're going to talk about Lean from a strategy deployment standpoint and top-down leadership. We're also going to talk about the importance of engaging everybody on the front lines and bridging those gaps between the C-suite and the front line. So you can learn more about Gary. You can find links, transcript, video, and more by going to leanblog.org/470. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Our guest today is Gary Michel. He was most recently chairman and CEO of a company called JELD-WEN until August 2002. And then just after that, I saw him give an really outstanding keynote talk at the AME annual conference in Dallas. So Gary was previously president and CEO of Honeywell Home and Building Technologies. He was president and CEO of ClubCar, and he also led the Trane HVAC business, among other executive roles. So Gary is an engineer. He has a BS in mechanical engineering from Virginia Tech and an MBA from the University of Phoenix. And his book, titled Decomplify, How Simplicity Drives Stability, Innovation, and Transformation, will be available later this year. So we'll get to talk about all of that and more. Gary, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Oh, thanks for having me, Mark. Doing well. Thank you.
So I'm glad we can, not to ask you to recreate that whole keynote talk, but there's a couple, follow-up questions and a couple other things that we can dig into. But, first off, I do like to ask guests about their Lean origin story, if you will, especially as you rose through the ranks to be CEO of different companies. How, where, and when did you first get introduced to Lean?
So I think like a lot of people, particularly, running, manufacturing businesses, we all grew up with, quality, learning about quality and demand flow. And I guess everything kind of came together for me when I was running a business called Road Development, an asphalt paver business, asphalt pavers and compacting business that Ingersoll Rand had. And we were making a major transformation in our product categories and really updating our products. And at that time, certainly in the operations, we had started some Lean transformations within the four walls. Certainly on some of the new lines for some of our new compactor products, and it was really slick. It really went well. It was everything you would expect, with great value stream mapping and all the way down visual management and really what you would expect in today, even in a great line setup. But I guess I was still subscribing back then to this, the old philosophy of a commercial end and product end of the business, front end of the business. And then we kind of tossed everything over and the operations folks kind of picked it up and ran with it from there. And we were trying to take the same flow dynamics that we had in the compactor business, which is a, higher volume, less variable business, to the paver business, which is the exact opposite, always station built. It was very custom, and we started to think about that, right? And we were looking at this global business, looking at this major transformation, and looking at how to flow that line. And what ended up showing up for me was, basically strategy deployment, right? Hoshin Connery, how do you line up, a critical few strategic decisions across an entire organization and get people to buy in and understand, their part of the whole. And for me, that's really when Lean as an enterprise business operating system or strategy came to life, where I really saw the magic of how alignment, communication, taking visual management from the top to the bottom of the organization and combining everybody really as one team. And it's maybe not the initial manufacturing introduction, but it's the introduction to how I saw it as a great enterprise tool.
Yeah. So I'd love to come back and explore some of that progression as you described it, from being a manufacturing thing to being more of an enterprise system. But what was the rough time frame for when you were exposed to that in the asphalt pavers business?
Early 2000s from the enterprise standpoint.
So it sounds like that was kind of, bubbling up through the organization, or the sponsorship for that lean manufacturing activity might have been taking place at a plant manager level, VP of ops level.
Yeah. So, my VP of ops at that time had certainly brought it into that business. Not to say we didn't have elements of lean in other facilities and other places in the business, but the total kind of certainly within the four walls was brought to me at that time.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could expand a little bit. I think it's really interesting, to think about any of us individually trying to shift away from deeply held, older philosophies. What I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, or if you can elaborate on this, that as a CEO, you were focused on sales, customer, product, and that manufacturing was a function that you didn't really have to pay much notice to, or how would you describe it, and how that shift occurred?
Yeah, I think we all grow up as general managers, certainly understanding our operations, and we give back in those days, we gave a portion of our time to operations, a portion of our time to the front end of the business, and it was how you where your priorities were and what each business needed. In my particular case, I did a lot of, I went into a lot of businesses that needed some sort of transformation. That was kind of what my remit usually was in going to these businesses. So it depended on what the need was at the time. In this particular case, the business needed kind of a little bit of both, right? And so I was able to use, my manufacturing bit to work on the manufacturing side. But again, there wasn't a tie to the overall growth strategy until, it was kind of like the aha moment of, if you get everybody aligned, if it's aligned on the same page and working together, you understand what's possible, but you also are able to make sure everybody, it gets it's kind of the right sequence at the right time, but making sure that everything's working together. So it wasn't that, never focused on manufacturing before. It certainly did. But just the putting all the elements together of flow, of visual management, of strategy deployment, putting it all together really was the first time for me.
Yeah. What you said there reminds me of some old Taiichi Ono advice from one of his books about the Toyota production system. There's a chapter just headed "Start from Need." And he would talk about your most pressing needs, where I think there's always a risk of people wanting to be prescriptive in terms of, well, here are the tools you need to implement because here's how we did it someplace else. So what would your guidance to other CEOs be about making sure that lean is really focused on the most pressing needs of the enterprise?
Well, I would say that part of it is also another saying there is go see, right? If you go see what's going on in your organization, where the work is being done, you're going to see the need. There's no doubt about it. It could be on the manufacturing floor. It could be in functional areas. It could be with your customers. But, my recommendation to every leader is go see. Go where the work's being done. That's where you're going to find out where the value is created, but you're also going to see where the opportunities are.
And you're also, you're reminding me of another quote. This is really more from healthcare circles. Dr. John Toussaint, who had been the CEO leading a lean transformation at a hospital system in Wisconsin. He had learned from manufacturing companies. And I've heard John say, if you've seen one lean transformation, you've seen one lean transformation. Right. So I was wondering if your reaction to that comment, or how you would elaborate on the idea of making sure that you're not just trying to copy something that worked for you before previously or something that worked elsewhere.
Yeah, I always tell people I feel like it's either Groundhog Day or I'm the kindergarten teacher, right? I see seem to see the same course over and over again. I teach problem solving a lot, right? It's usually where it starts. It's an easy way to start because it's something that you don't need all the other tools necessarily, but you can teach. You can teach a process. You can ask questions. You don't even need a form, right? You can ask the question: what problem are we trying to solve? What do we know? Where are we trying to get to? What do we think are the obstacles to getting there? But they if you've seen one, you've seen one. It's kind of true. Where you plug in and how you solve problems, to me, is really the essence of it all. The tools are just that. They're tools. And you've got to have a culture around problem solving and using the right tools then to solve the problem. So a hammer may work in one place and you need a screwdriver in another. But the idea of it really flowing around problem solving, to me, is where you start. Half the problem, of course, is just defining the problem sometimes. And but I've always felt that if we can focus around a problem solving, creating an entire organization of problem solvers, even, we can then start to understand where we need to apply different tools to do different things. And to me, that's really, really kind of the essence of how I start an organization into lean. Is really not even calling it that, right? We're talking about problem solving.
So I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. I mean, first off, like who were your teachers or guides or coaches in terms of this style of problem solving?
Well, I mean, there've been many along the way. I mean, I've one of the very a guy named Ken Martin was the guy at Rode who really was fascinated with the kind of Toyota production system and brought lean to our factory there. I've had a number of coaches along the way. Dan McDonald, Greg Miner. These guys have been, have taught me quite a bit over the way. A lady named Mary Kotler, who you may or may not know, was, worked with me in operations at ClubCar, in fact, and she had come from another industry and brought some great things. So a lot of people along the way, but a lot of reading, a lot of studying, and a lot of just doing. It was one of the things is just get out there and do it. Yeah. But problem solving, is something that there's plenty written on it. You can read all about it, but you really need to dive in and roll up your sleeves and be part of helping to solve problems and playing the correct roles as well. As a leader in particular, it's about asking questions and being curious. If you have those traits, you're going to probably be a pretty good problem solver.
Yeah. So then in your roles as CEO, I'm curious to hear, how you would help people through the need to shed old habits, old philosophies of, let's say, for example, not wanting to take the time to properly define the problem, the tendency or the habit to want to jump to solutions or rush into implementation. Like how would you coach or guide or help people not just learn lean, but move past, the old way that might have helped them rise up through the ranks?
So, I mean, I think, one of the things is we're all taught our education system, right? And even when we get into business is kind of backwards for lean. We're all taught how to solve problems, right? We're taught, come up with the answer, and give me the answer. And that's what we are. We're problem solvers. We want to jump right to solving the problem and giving the answer. And that's what gets us promoted. It's what gets us jobs. It what gets us promoted. We get into positions where we're trying to move organizations, and we still have that tendency, bias to action and solve a problem. It's what we're not taught is how to ask questions and how to draw out a little deeper meaning and what the problem might be for others, and help others learn to be problem solvers as well. So for me, it's about that, right? It's figuring out and helping people understand that their role has changed as a leader, to be somebody that's got to enable others to be problem solvers. And the way you do that is through asking questions, observing, being there. The higher an organization you go, the further away you are from actually doing the work. So there's a couple of things you need to realize. One, in my case, is the people closest to the work usually know how to do their job better than anybody else. They know what the problems are. And if they're enabled, they'll help solve them, and they'll come up with new ways to do the work better. So we need to make sure that we identify where that work is being done, where the problem can best be solved, and give those folks the tools, the capabilities, quite frankly, the authority to go and solve those problems as well. So that's how I would coach a new leader, or a leader that doesn't quite understand that. The other side of that, the benefit of that, is if we create an entire organization of problem solvers, it frees up leadership's time to do other things, to solve the problems that are outside of their purview, or to focus more on growth and other things that are important to the enterprise as well.
Yeah. So over time, as you're working with other leaders, in terms of what has an impact on the culture, like how much of it is a matter of coaching up leaders versus kind of selecting certain leaders for promotion based on their ability to adapt, or their ability to adopt some of these new habits as you're describing?
So I think it's really important. I mean, a culture of problem solving, a culture that focuses on lean, and you really have to have an environment that's aligned. I often talk about a couple of elements. One is having a rally cry within your company. It's probably something internal, but something that sets the direction for the entire company, or team, that helps people rally around kind of your mission and something they get excited about and want to be a part of. But to me, you can set the culture in motion, a number of different ways. But one is engaging everybody at every level in the business. Being transparent about where you are, being transparent about where you want to go, and then involving them in the process. One of the things I like to do, as certainly did as a CEO, love to do it as a leader of a business, is anytime there are new hires in the company. So I did this every quarter. Anybody hired in the company, anywhere in the quarter, I spent an hour with the group on a call, just on a video, and if they could be local, we would do it local, but we would normally do it that way as well. And I would just point out that what I'm really trying to understand and create is an environment where they're not fearful of asking me questions or pointing things out to me. So what I ask in that call, very simply, is tell me, introduce yourself to me. Why did you come to the company? What were you expecting in your first 90 days or however long you've been here? How has your expectation matched reality? And are there any opportunities that you've noticed since you've been here, that you could point out to us with your fresh eyes, that maybe we don't see, or we've been walking by? And it does a couple of things. Number one, out of that, I get some gems, right? Of where the culture, mostly at that point, there's cultural things they were expecting, and it helps me understand: are we matching the culture we're selling, or the culture we aspire to, with what's actually there? That's where that is. But it also starts to create that environment that even somebody who's only been with the company a few weeks or a few months is comfortable pointing out areas of opportunity or problems that they see. I do that also with when people go into new jobs. Now there it's more a one-on-one, but if they go into a new role, again, I ask them very quickly within their first the quarter or so of being there to share with me their observations, things that they see, because your fresh eyes are it's a great opportunity to see things. I get asked sometimes, we walk plants, right? You've done this as well. You walk a plant, and invariably you go into a plant, and you're going to see something that they've been walking by for months, weeks, whatever, and they always get frustrated. They're like, "How come you come in here and you can see something that we just didn't see?" And the point is after time, it becomes part of the fabric. You just don't even notice it. It's not that anybody's smarter or we're trying to play a game or anything. It's just fresh eyes always see something that other people don't. And that's about creating the culture, changing the culture. It's more than just a cute saying, fresh eyes. It's about creating that culture of pointing things out that may be out of place.
Yeah. So let's get out to the Gemba, to the shop floor here, I guess, with our conversation, because you keep.
Sure.
I appreciate that you keep taking us there. And speaking of old philosophies to move away from, I saw that, for example, like when I was at General Motors, the first plant manager I worked under was the very traditional stay in the mahogany paneled corner office type. He only came out to the factory if there was some really big, huge problem, and he didn't contribute much other than like glaring, about when's it going to be fixed, versus a second plant manager who did spend all of his time out in the factory, or a lot of it. He was Toyota trained, through the GM NUMMI partnership. So how often did you run into some version of that old habit, or trying to convince other leaders to do like you were doing? You were leading by example, but maybe that's what it took.
Well, that's kind of the answer, right? Unfortunately, there's still a lot of plant managers, a lot of companies that operate that way. That I kind of got the religion, a couple of decades ago. Other people, still haven't gotten it, and I think that separates good companies from great companies. But the part of it is by example. Almost every time, it's part of my leader standard work. Is going to Gemba. Part of that is obviously going into factories and participating in. I want to participate in their walk, not create a new one. Now, I understand that, more senior a leader you are, you show up, something is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little special. But for the most part, I ask when their walk is, not, creating one around my schedule. So I try to walk along. It's their walk, and I participate. And I watch how it happens. It's you can usually tell fairly quickly if it's a normal practice or not, if it's part of the organization, because just how people react. But again, helping. When I go through there, I ask questions out of curiosity. It's just a habit I have. So I watch what happens, and if there's something I want to ask, I will ask it, just like anybody else. But part of it is just showing the way, right? Showing how it's done. Back to that idea that we're not really taught how to ask questions. We're taught how to solve problems. Some people, some plant managers even to this day, but, even general managers and, non-operational leaders who are asked to go to Gemba, are afraid of that. It's something that they're not comfortable in. It's something they've never done. They're afraid they're going to screw it up or ask the wrong question or, whatever. So part of it is just showing that, lean is really, it's really common sense, right? We've got visual management. We usually have the prompts there to see how things are going. And it doesn't take a lot to figure out, if it's done right, how to figure out if something's operating correctly or not. Usually, in a plant environment, the role that I end up playing is understanding why something's been out of whack for longer than it should have been, and trying to help and provide resources when necessary to solve that problem. And sometimes it's just asking about it, right? Making sure people are aligned. So really, it's bringing the people along and showing by example, and asking certain types of questions. After a few of them, they get the idea of what the questions are that you should ask, and they realize they're pretty practical questions.
Yeah. And then you've brought up fear a couple of times and the need to help reduce or eliminate that fear. I think it's really interesting when you have anybody who has decades of habit leading the other way and they're trying to do something new. That can be scary. People will make mistakes when they're trying something new. Like, did you sort of try to give permission or at least set an expectation of, look, okay, if you're afraid of making mistakes, you probably will, and we'll learn from it and work through it?
Well, sure. I mean, I'm going to make a mistake too. I'm going to ask a question and somebody's going to, give me an answer and I'm going to go, duh, right? And it was right there. Or,
Right.
Or it was, hopefully not an inappropriate question, but it's something that, maybe didn't make sense, or, somebody gives me the right answer. So I try to be as vulnerable and as normal as possible. And we get it, right? The other thing is, if I'm taking somebody on a Gemba walk, or to a plant or to a function or wherever for their very first time, I try to be cognizant of that, right? I try to make sure that they have an opportunity to see, this is just we got to make it normal, right? It's not something that we should be afraid of. We're all on the same team. We all have the same objective. We're all trying to do the same thing. This is not about playing gotcha. It's not about making somebody look stupid. It's about how do we make it as easy as possible for the people doing the work to do the work. And, as somebody coming from, outside of the actual work environment, I may have resources, tools, or seen solutions that they haven't seen. And we try to make that, we try to make leaders understand that that's their role, is to really try to integrate, the more tools that they have to bring to the problem. It's not their job to solve the problem. It's their job to help solve the problem and to make the resources available to do it.
Yeah. So back to the beginning of your talk, you caught my attention right away when your first slide was a picture of Max, a production specialist from JELD-WEN. I was wondering if you could tell us that story and then maybe kind of weave in a little bit of why that was the way you started your talk there at AME, because it stood out. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah, well, I like to, it's particularly when you're giving a talk at a lean conference, you want to talk about what works and what lean is really about. But I think that particular Gemba walk and that particular story has always resonated with me. It happened at that time, it was probably months before, but maybe a year ago, I was on a Gemba walk in a JELD-WEN facility in Venice, Florida. It happened to be where we make vinyl windows and patio doors. And Max is a glazier. He works on the line there, and at the time was putting together vinyl windows. So he's the guy that puts the glass in the windows and assembles them. A pretty important guy. And so we started on the Gemba walk, and we actually were doing stand in the circle exercise, right? You stand there, you observe the work being done, and you do nothing else, right, except for observe and then try to understand what's going on. And what we saw with Max was he's running around like crazy. Now he's waving at us and smiling. He's a really friendly guy, but he's working really, really hard. And he's running around trying to find glass to put in the windows that he was building that day. And so we stopped. We talked to Max, and Max explained to me that the normally the carts, the glass is on the carts in sequenced order, and he just picks the glass, and that tells him what to build, and he builds the window, and everything's great. Unfortunately, some of the glass was not where it needed to be. There were empty slots in the carts. So what he was doing was he was finding complete sets that he could build, and he was on the fly, building windows that he could build, which is great. He was doing. He didn't want to miss tack. He didn't want to upset customers down the stream. But the reality was he was working extra hard, and it just wasn't right. So I asked Max, "Hey, what would it take to solve your problem?" And let's take care of Max, because we want Max to stay there and build windows. He said, "Listen, if I could have a spotter, somebody that could do this reordering of the glass and the carts for me, that would be really helpful. I could build more windows and be faster." So we did that right away. But the reality of that whole story is, it wasn't Max's problem, right? It was beyond Max's scope to fix the problem. So we tried to help him right away with that, just by observing the work and talking to Max. He already had a solution in mind. We just needed to make it happen. But the real problem was we weren't getting glass, right? There was a glass shortage at the time, and glass wasn't coming in, and we needed to probably adjust our standard work to make that happen. So a lot of things come out of that story, which is, one, let's help Max and make sure that we're keeping him happy, so we can keep customers happy. But the second piece is making sure that we do ask enough questions to understand where the problem really is. You can imagine if we'd never gone to Gemba, we'd be, the customer service people are complaining that customers aren't getting their windows on time or complete or whatever. We could sit in a conference room and solve that problem and say, you know what, we need to, we need to push more windows out. We need to yell at somebody, do whatever, right? Or maybe we're not getting the sales we think, so we go out and we do a promotion or do something else, when we really need to sit down and solve that problem, which is find out that we have a supply issue at that particular time, and we need to go solve the supply problem, which is causing this overall problem of getting enough windows out to customers at the right time. So the story, to me, just exemplifies, by going and seeing, you actually, while you think you're solving one little problem in a line in a factory for one guy, what you're really doing is finding out, where your big problems are, where your constraints to grow the business, to meet your commitments, and keep your customers happy as well.
Yeah. I mean, the story and the way you talk through it, it really does illustrate so many of the points that you've made of being inquisitive instead of making assumptions, or making sure you understand, is what we're observing here, is that normal? Like, is it a bad process, or has something gone wrong with the process? And as you described, there's so many ways that could get off track or go off the rails. If, let's say, the one new habit of going out into the factory still brings with it the old habits of needing to have the answer, rushing into action, making assumptions instead of being inquisitive. That could have gone differently with a different set of leaders.
Absolutely. And the really great part of that is that that was not normal, and they recognized it wasn't normal. Yeah, you're right. It could have gone a lot of different ways in different plants and different scenarios.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book, Gary. Decomplify, a word that may or may not be in the dictionary.
It is not.
It is not. So tell us the origin of creating that word, decomplify, and more importantly, what it means to you.
So the origin of the word is decades old. Early in my, in one of my early leadership roles, I guess I was lamenting with a colleague about how they always seem to complify, or they always seem to make more complicated all of our processes. They don't leave things alone. Things could be so simple, but they, probably corporate or whoever at the time, just seem to always make things more complicated than they need to be. I think we've all had that question or comment at some point. And a colleague shared that sentiment with me as well. And he actually talked about how they complify things. So for whatever reason, I picked up that word and it became part of my lexicon for a lot of years. And the reality is when I retired the first time, it was actually somebody made that comment that they kind of gave me that word as my word at my retirement dinner, and I thought about it, and decomplifying things is something I'm always trying to do, and I thought that it just fit really well with the style of leadership and the style, a lot of the things we talk about in lean that that I profess I profess to use. I want our organizations to be, and quite frankly, the simpler we make things, the easier it is. Number one, to stabilize them, but also to transform them and to grow.
Yeah. So then, in that process of decomplifying, one other question that comes to mind is like, and as a senior executive, you're thinking of all the things you could be focusing on and the high level strategy deployment questions of what you should be doing. Trying to think through a situation where, how do you diagnose, or do we need to simplify and take waste out of what we're already doing versus a need to be innovative and to be doing new things in a different way, or asked a different way, improving the old process versus creating something new? Where do you find that balance?
So, I mean, it's almost you're almost asking the old paradoxical, do we want productivity or do we want growth? Which do you want? And I want both.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to do it in the right balance. Which kind of leads me to kind of the premise of my whole belief around decomplifying. Most companies probably all share about the same strategy. They all want to outgrow their competition on the top line. They want to gain share in their product category. They want to be leaders there, and they want to continuously improve their margins and their returns for their shareholders. They all want to be great companies, and which has kind of led me to this definition of a great company. So the great company in my mind is a company that people want to buy from, people want to work for, and people want to invest in. Mm-hmm. People want to buy from a great company because they like the services and the products that the company offers. They feel that the relationship is great and it's easy to do business with a great company. People want to work for a great company because they're aligned with the direction, the values, the aspirations of the company. They feel that they can make a difference and they can make a contribution and it will be recognized, as well as they can realize their own personal and career aspirations. People want to invest in a great company because it delivers superior financial returns, sustainably, consistently over a long period of time. And I'll add the caveat that great companies also always do the right thing. So if that is your premise for what you want to do, the importance of being able to do those things sustainably over time means a number of things. Lean gives us a continuous improvement kind of mantra and culture, the ability to continually look at what we're doing to continually improve and grow. But part of that is the ability to innovate and change and redefine our future. If we always do what we're currently doing, we're probably going to fall behind. And it's probably not going to be what will sustain that same definition of a great company for our customers, for our people, or for our investors in the long term. So while we're focused on doing what we do today better and better over time, and we can always do that, we should also be expending energy to look at what we can do to continue to transform ourselves using, it could be new technology, new products, could be new business processes, it could be a whole new business model, or it could be associated with how we actually serve our customers as much as what we sell them. So there's a lot of different places we can look for innovation. And they come out of by the way, they come out of problem solving. They come out of being at Gemba, being out with our customers, being out and understanding how to solve their problems and even their customers' problems becomes part of how we innovate going forward. So it's not an either or to me.
Sure.
It's really an and.
Yeah. So you touched on, here's another and, problem solving and communication. Mm-hmm. And one thing I think was an interesting practice I was going to ask you about was, I know what you've called the A3 open mic. If you can talk about what that is and why that was so helpful.
So, I'll give the credit where it's due to the team at JELD-WEN. They implemented something, and I loved participating in it, but it was called open mic. It was A3 open mic, actually, and it was once a month was the cadence, and it was an open opportunity for anybody that was working on an A3 or had recently completed an A3 to get on the call. And it was a nice mix of people that wanted to share a problem that they had solved or were solving for the benefit of, number one, saying, hey, we did this, but also sharing across. Box 9, by the way, is on an A3 is always forgotten, right? What did we learn? Right. And who can we share this with, right? Where else might we see this problem show up? Right. So this was part of Box 9, really, of sharing across the organization. But the other part of open mic was if you had an A3 that you wanted some coaching on, or felt that you were stuck or could use a little bit of help from across the organization, this was an opportunity that became a safe environment, believe it or not, even though an open mic, to ask those kind of questions, to share your problem in an open environment. It really shows a culture, a trusting, open, problem-solving culture that can serve, that can thrive, and that people show up. No one's told to do well. I assume some people are probably told by their boss to be there, but sure. My guess is, for the most part, it's a volunteer. It's a volunteer opportunity. So it is great. It's kind of a good balance of, you get kudos for solving a good problem and sharing it across, but you also have an opportunity to get help from people that otherwise, would not be, kind of in your circle of helpers.
Yeah. So when you talk about that safe environment, it's not just safe to come and share successes, it's safe to share your struggle.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's important about a thriving culture, to be that great company culture, that decomplified culture. You've got to have a safe environment where it's okay to bring up problems. Because if you don't bring up problems, if you don't identify them, you'll never solve them.
So one other thing I wanted to ask for before we wrap up, you talk about sharing, you talk about that aspect of problem solving. So I'm kind of picturing, it may or may not exist, a Gary Michel personal or corporate A3 that talks about the problems you've solved, the current state, the countermeasures that include lean, and you talk about the results, and now you want to share this with others. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And there's always discussion around this question of, well, if lean is clearly a better way, not just to do manufacturing, but a better way of running an enterprise, and this has been known about for decades now, why does it still seem like it's the exception more than the norm? Like, what are some opportunities? And I'm sure the book Decomplify will be part of it, like to share this in a way that maybe influences other senior leaders to maybe also try this path.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that because, to me now, I can't imagine running a company any other way, but I know how hard it is to start a company on that path because I've had to do it a few times. But it takes somebody, an impetus, almost a reason sometimes to get started, right? It's, I think it's, what is our definition of lean, right? It's, I talk about in my book is lean is part of it. It's a tool set that helps you. I mean, it's an important tool set, but it's a tool set that helps you. But my book is not in and of itself about lean. Um, the the reality, it's about creating that culture where you focus on the things that are important and you strip away the things that are not. You focus on value. Create value. And this is what lean is about as well. Focus on what creates value, what matters to your customers, how you engage and respect your employees, your associates, and how do you deliver consistently the results that people look for to invest in. And to me, I've not found a better way to do it than to use lean tools. But they are tools. They are just that. Mm-hmm. You still need to have a direction, a strategy, a way that you're planning to go. And I think people kind of get confused, like it's one or the other, or that you see this massive number of tools in lean and you think you've got to know what every single one of them is. The big secret for me as a leader is you don't really need to know what all those tools do. If you really need a tool, a specific a tool deployed, there are plenty of people who can help you teach people to use tools. That's not it. It's really about common sense and understanding, this idea of having a problem-solving culture and focused on those few things. So for me, it's just the way I do it. Anybody I talk to, we have these conversations, but it's a matter of understanding how to stay there. Now, the other side of that question that I get a lot is, and I think I got at the conference we were at, is so what if the top leadership of my company doesn't support or hasn't isn't pushing lean, or the CEO isn't driving this. To me, that's the best of all worlds is everybody from top to bottom is engaged and using the same tools and the same. But if you're running a function or you're running a factory or you're running a business, you can deploy lean. You can use the tools, use the mentality, use the crux of it to operate your business. Everything can start there. And once you start performing as a business and outperforming everybody else, other people are going to ask what's going on and how are you doing it? And I can assure you, you will become the new lean zealot, and people will be copying.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, it doesn't seem like you would want to send a CEO to a class to learn all the tools, but you're talking about lean tools plus mentalities, culture, management system. Like, to me, that can all be wrapped in this label of lean or the Toyota way or however you might label it. Like you're describing all of that working together, and it seems like the CEO or senior leaders have more influence around culture.
So maybe the way to kind of put a fine point on that is, the first chapter of my book is Go See, and you'll see Max again, and you'll hear about really why that's important. But it ends with the concept of leader standard work. It really talks about leadership and leaders being important to creating this great company culture and becoming great companies. But it ends with talking about leader standard work, and where leaders spend their time is indicative of being complicated or not. To me, what I do every day, what I do every week, every month, every quarter, every year becomes important. And if you can decomplify that, your work and lay it out where you're spending time, you are absolutely committed to spending time going to Gemba, spending time on developing your people, spending time with customers and investors in the right proportion. That becomes the mantra, that becomes the cadence for the rest of the company as well. And it's how you spend your time, how you set out to spend your time, and then live up to that. So leader standard work is actually one of the components that I bring in very, very early. In fact, in the first chapter of the book.
So it seems like it's a shift from somebody might say, I'm too important to have leader standard work, to realizing it's very important that they do. I mean, that's moving past an old philosophy of, right, well, I'm reacting to things. I can't plan out my time.
Well, I think if you're reacting, then you're not in a decomplified state, right? You're not in a lean state either. You need, as a leader, to be able to look around corners. You need to make sure that you're focusing on the right things, the things that add value. And so making that determination is really important. And the way that you cement that, the way that you codify that, is in creating leader standard work. So, is every part of my leader standard work, written down to step 1, step 2, step 3?
Sure.
No. But is it laid out in a cadence of, I do these things? The answer is yes. And, publish that, let people know what that is. And to me, that's really important. That sets the tone for how you want to operate the organization.
So Gary, maybe one final question. You mentioned strategy deployment earlier. Can you talk about decomplifying some of those annual cycles of planning and evaluating strategy and turning strategy into action? Can you give us kind of a before and after comparison of pre-strategy deployment and then what the benefits of strategy deployment were?
So I think we tend to focus on the things that we're doing now rather than on the things that maybe we should be doing. Seems to be kind of the way I sum up the difference. The tradition of these massive strategic plans, that are a lot of people put a lot of hard work into, a lot of data is collected, and just days and days of presentations. I think those are they're beneficial, but they're rare. The problem with those is they rarely get executed in a way that's sufficient. They're not tied to the reality of the organization. I'm not discounting the work. The work needs to be done. We need to understand what's going on in our markets. What technology capabilities are there? Are there better operational solutions to things? What problems could we solve for our customers that would help us to reinvent ourselves over time? We need to do that. But I like to do it in a process I call critical strategic decisions. Similar type work, but really defining, in the old traditional way, where are we going to play? What game are we playing? How do we win? What do we need to win? And then how do we, what are the resources, tools, and systems that need to go there? But we really start to focus on just a couple of these. Some people call them breakthrough initiatives. I start with critical strategic decisions. What are those 3 to 5 year, really 2 to 3 things, right? That we're really going to focus on. We really believe, and we're all going to get behind, bar anything else, in order to do. And then once we've done that, then we go into the deployment part, the execution part, which is the hard part. That's where, strategy deployment, Hoshin comes in. You kind of enter that process with these critical strategic decisions, and then you start to break them into manageable chunks that you can define, that people can understand. What do we need to do in year 1, and then go after it, and then start to cascade those goals so that you're tied from your critical strategic decisions through your annual objectives, all the way through the initiatives and what people need to drive. And then that's what you review every month, right? You review, obviously, your financials. I make my financials a part of the tracker for every business or function. You review those, you see if you're on track or not on track and what you need to do there. But you're also reviewing the status of where you are on those critical strategic decisions every single month, and looking at the process as much as the output. And if you can make that part of your normal tactic, it becomes this virtuous cycle that just starts feeding itself. So your strategy discussions, while they tend to sort of be focused on the summer months and getting ready for an annual operating plan, the reality is we're really always thinking about it, and we're always modifying what we learn month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. I will point out that I try to also make it very easy on the annual operating side. I kind of have an algorithm on the financials of, if our goal is always to grow the top line better than our competitors and continuously improve our margins, there's a few things that, we need to start out on the financials with to allow ourselves to make sure that happens, right? And then also to give ourselves money to invest in the rest of the business and the CSDs. So I do have an algorithm for that, but the point is make it very, very simple, make it easy to understand, and get it to the point where after a couple of cycles, it's just part of your cadence. And again, part of your leader standard work. The idea of creating that big book and putting it on the shelf just never appealed to me. And by the way, I never saw, most of it never gets executed.
Well, Gary, thank you first off again for speaking at the AME conference. Thank you for being here with us today. So we've been joined again by Gary Michel. Upcoming book, I'm really excited about it. Decomplify: How Simplicity Drives Stability, Innovation, and Transformation. So hopefully I've made good use of your time. We're going to think about the questions I asked versus the questions I should have asked. Think of that as my own strategy deployment cycle here.
No, it was great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. It's always a lot of fun to share some of these stories.
Well, thanks again.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.